Let's talk about telepathy. A lot of people think that reading somebody else's mind or finishing each other's sentences is what twin flame telepathy is like, but that's not exactly what it's like. It's actually a lot bigger than that. So I want to just talk out my experience with telepathy, how I've experienced it with my twin versus how I've experienced it with other people. And I just want to give you a good idea of something to think about. So if you're still trying to figure out if this person is your twin flame or a soulmate or a karmic, or just whatever kind of soul connection. Maybe they're just a normal person that you're dating, big deal. So this will help you figure that out for yourself. And I'm always a big fan of discernment, using your own gut to decide what's right for you. I mean, I have strong opinions, but it might not be right for you. So what I've experienced with telepathy with my twin flame. So I've been on this journey for about 3 decades, and it was one of the first things that made me feel like things were different with this person. If you've listened to any of my other videos, you know that there was no Google or internet or anything back in the day, so there was no blog to tell me what to look for 1111 or any of that nonsense. So I had to figure all this out on my own, which is why I'm sharing this story. I'm now seeing that my journey has been unique for a reason. And so it's important for me to share it. There's a lot of people who are just now coming online as twin flames, but they have all these templates to look at and all these blogs and things. So anyway, for me, there was a lot of things in the very beginning that just were like peculiar is the way I would have worded it. Now you'd probably call it a synchronicity, but for me, it was definitely just peculiar. So one of the first things that I recognized, I don't know that I would have used the word telepathy, but it definitely early on I kind of realized that that was what was happening. One of the first times was I was standing. We met in college, and I was standing in his dorm room, and we were just all hanging out, a bunch of his friends and stuff. And he was up on his bunk bed, and I was just standing talking to whatever. I don't even remember, but I just remember having an itch on my head, and he reached over right where I had the itch and scratched it for me. When I remember thinking that was weird. Like, how did he know? But, easy to brush it off, right? So I was just like, okay, whatever, but it was very noted. And then a couple other things, little things like that happened that were just easy to write off as coincidences. But skip forward. It was our first big separation we'd had. I mean, we stayed friends after we broke up. So it's kind of hard. My journey is very different than others as far as like unions and separations with my twin flame have been very much a layer. Like I look at my journey like an onion, and things are all layers of an onion. So with our big separation, we stopped being friends. It was just too intense. The first big, huge telepathic moment was really threw me off. Was this one day, and we had, it was whatever, it was fine. I was dating people he was dating, like whatever. So I would wake up in the morning. We lived in the same apartment complex, and I would wake up in the morning and I would just know that his girlfriend was visiting. And again, there was no Facebook, there was no social media, there was no Google, there was no cell phones, there was none of that nonsense. So there was no way I would have known that she was visiting. But I would get on the bus to go to school, and there they were. And that happened a lot, like pretty much every time she was visiting, because they had an out of town relationship. So that was definitely opening me up to telepathy and what that felt like. And I think I must have I've always called it, I don't know if I've ever called it telepathy until like later, but what I used to call it in my mind was just knowing. Now I call it the twin flame knowing. I feel like that's a better word than telepathy, because I have telepathy with other people in my life, lots of other people. And if you're married to somebody or you live with somebody long enough, you'll just synchronize in that way. So I don't feel like it's specific to twin flames telepathy. Another big one that I had that was another one that just really threw me off, and this is part of the reason we stopped being friends, was because it just all this 5D stuff was starting to get activated in me. And it was really hard because I felt really alone. I didn't feel like I could talk to him about it because he had a person, he was dating somebody. And out of respect for their relationship, I didn't want to do it. Plus, I felt crazy for obvious reasons. So I never talked to him about any of this stuff, but I did have other friends that I did have light telepathy with, and I could talk to them about stuff like that. So that helped a lot. One was same apartment complex back in the same era. Um, One of our friend, a good friend of ours, I was just like, oh, I wonder what so and so is doing. And again, we don't have texting, so nor now you just text that person, be like, hey, what's up, you know? But I just was like, oh, I wonder what so and so is doing, and then not even 5 minutes later, that person showed up at my door, and I talked to him about it because we're friends and we have an easy relationship. So I was able to be like, oh my gosh, I was just summoning you. I was just saying I wanted to hang out, and he was like, yeah. So I was driving somewhere, and I just turned around and thought, oh, I need to go see Heather. So that friend came over, and that was one of the first times I realized I had telepathy with someone other than my twin flame. And again, I didn't have the term twin flame back then, so none of this stuff was happening. So it was helpful for me to at least be able to talk to our mutual friend about this. I was like, oh, that's cool. I totally manifested you or summoned you. I don't remember the words I used back then because, again, I didn't have all the resources you guys have now for the terminology. But anyway, not long after that, so I look at this now with retrospect, and I'm like, man, that whole couple months I was being activated is what was happening. All these 5D skills that I have were getting activated, and I didn't even know. I just felt crazy, I didn't really feel that magical. So another one that happened was, and I was in a good place. I felt like fine. I'd kind of come to terms with things as much as I could. And this one day, out of the blue, I remember it was a Saturday, and I was in my apartment, and none of my roommates were around. And I was sitting on the back step of my back door just crying and screaming and shaking and rocking and like completely overwhelmed emotionally, 100%. And I was just screaming to my person. I was like, come see me, come see me, come see me, like, come here. Like, I was just like, and I remember I was saying it out loud. I was so emotional, and it had come from nowhere. I was fine. At least I thought I was fine. And I'll do a different video about this because this has happened now probably a handful of times, like maybe 5 different times in my life with this person. And now I have a better sense of what that is. I think I definitely know that I'm feeling his emotions when that happens, when it's so overwhelming, because I'm normally not an overly emotional person. And I can regulate my mood fairly well. So anyway, I just was like the whole day, and again, thank goodness there was. Maybe thank goodness, I don't know, but if I had known where a mental hospital was, I would have checked myself in because it was so all-encompassing, overwhelming. I didn't know why I was feeling this way. I had not talked to him in a while, so I didn't know what was going on. Like, I just was, and it was very clear that like I needed him to come see me. Like I needed to console him. Is the way it was. That's the way it felt. It was so strange. It's so confusing. And so I spent all day just like rocking and shaking and crying and like being completely overwhelmed energetically. It was so, like I said, I literally would have checked myself into a mental hospital if I had known where one was. It was so overwhelming. So I don't know if it was the next day or sometime that week. It was it wasn't that same day, but it was very near that. And one of his friends told me that his grandfather had died and that he had flown home that day when he found out. And so I was picking up on all of his emotion. I was taking it on. I was feeling it. That made me feel nuts. It's another reason why it was so hard. I couldn't talk to him about it. Now all these years later, I wish I had. I wish I had just had that kind of, because it's like, what, But at the time, I had no framework. I had no knowledge of how any of this metaphysical stuff worked, or that other people have this, or I just felt nuts. I felt nuts. So that was the most intense version of telepathy that I've had with my twin flame. So skip forward, a lot of decades go by, or at least a decade goes by, and I've made other friends, and I've moved on, and we, live in our lives and becoming adults and all that stuff, moved around, traveled, done all the things. Big separation for sure. because our friendship had, fallen apart, and this kind of 5D stuff was not helping because I could not, I felt like a tea kettle and I could not keep the lid on any of it. It was so overwhelming. And again, I had no one to talk to. I'd stopped talking to friends about this person and everything. So, anyway, skip forward, and I made a friend, I don't know, maybe 10 years later, 15 years later. I made a friend, and I wouldn't call him, at the time I thought he was more of a soulmate, like, how you can have soulmate friends. This person's definitely of that category for me. Someone who comes into your life and you teach each other and you point each other in the right direction, and then they leave your life and and that's it. Like that, those kind of people are amazing to have in your life. Like, they're a very short term. It was like 2 years of my life that I had this good friend, and we both made each other live up to our potential and get onto the path we were meant to be on. That was definitely our role as friends, and it was so easy and fun and relaxing. Like, I really struggled not being physically attracted to him and he me, but this was the thing, is he and I could talk about it. We talked about everything. We were like an old married couple. We had no attraction for each other, but everything else was there. Like, we kept joking that we would want to live in an old folks home together, side by side when we get old. But anyway, it was confusing because he was, the ease was very similar to my twin flame in that I was fully me in his presence, and it was very easy. It was a very easy friendship. And he and I have some telepathy, and he and I have some premonitions. So a lot of things got activated when I lived with him. So this is where I think this is what people are really trying to talk about when they talk about catalysts and false twin flames. I never thought he was like my twin flame. It helped me understand my relationship with my twin flame more, being friends with this person. And maybe that's just because I'm a really discerning person, and I love diving into like self-help type stuff. So, and because he and I had open communication, we could talk about anything with no emotion. I mean, it was awesome having a friend like that just, over dinner we could be talking about anything, like telepathy, and we'd be talking about it with the lack of attachment, just like we'd be talking about the weather, right? So anyway, everything got honed in a little bit more. I got better at it when I was living with him. We were roommates. We were friends and roommates. So he had a lot of premonitions in his life. And I'd had some telepathy. So we used to talk about that kind of stuff a lot and compare stories. And then because we were open to it and open to each other and open mentally and emotionally to each other, as really good friends, maybe a soulmate, I guess, is the best way to put it. Or I guess false twin flame, but I hate that term because I don't think it's used by real twin flames. It's really only used by by people who are actually themselves false twin flames. But anyway, so my friend and I, my skills got honed in when I was with him, and we had a lot of telepathy. He could always read my mind. He always knew what mood I was in or what was going on. He could read my face just, it was a language that he spoke, and vice versa. Communication was always so easy. We never misunderstood each other. But that's just normal. I feel like a lot of that's just really normal day-to-day stuff. Like, if you have a long-term partner, you get to that point. You have that with a lot of your family. If you have if you don't have a strained relationship with your family, you can have that. I've had that with a lot of friends, like good friends. We have a lot of telepathy. And so with him, it was like that too. But the reason I'm bringing him up is because something happened that if I didn't already know my twin flame, I would have thought this was my twin flame. So if for those of you who are trying to figure out the difference between a false twin flame, a catalyst, whether you have a twin flame or not, this story might help you. So what happened was he and I moved. I bought my house and he moved across the country. And so, we were just friends, but we separated in a natural course of events. And we were still friends and all that. But I had a dream one morning, and it had been like a year maybe that he had been gone, and of course, at first you miss him because you're used to the routine of having that person in your life every day. But then that fades, and that's the main difference between everybody else and a twin flame. It just eventually it fades. give it 6 months and you don't think about them, and you get a new routine and new friends, and it's fine. And it's not the same with a twin flame. They never leave your brain. They're in the back of your mind constantly. So anyway, it had been about a year, and I was definitely over all of the withdrawal is the way I looked at it. Withdrawal of having him as my day-to-day friend, my best friend. He was my best friend. And anyway, I woke up one morning and I'd had a dream. I just woke up from the dream and that he was in town visiting our mutual friends, and he didn't call me. And I was like, wow, that's weird, that I just had that dream, and I'm in that foggy post waking up dream stage. And I'm just like, oh, what? I haven't thought about him in a while. Like, that's weird that I just had that dream. While I'm waking up and in that fog, I don't remember if it's called delta or theta or whatever that phase is when you're going to sleep and waking up. Anyway, I was in the middle of that fog and kind of harshly judging myself a little bit, like, oh man, why am I thinking about him? And da da da. My phone rings, and we have cell phones. So my phone rings and I look over, and it's one of our mutual friends calling me. I'm like, well, that's weird. That guy never calls me ever. So I answer the phone, and it was this friend. It was the friend that I had the dream about, that I used to live with. Maybe a false twin flame, if you want to use that word. I don't like that word. But I look at him more as a soulmate friend. That's the way I explain it. Anyway, so my soulmate friend was calling me using his friend's phone because he didn't have my number, which is weird. I don't think he had a cell phone. It was early years of cell phones, and he was anti-cell phone. I don't know. But anyway, so my point is with the telepathy of the story is this was a premonition dream that I'd had. Okay, so it's a little different than telepathy, but it's basically the same genre. And if I hadn't already met my twin flame, I would have really been thrown off by this situation. But I wasn't, because it's not the same. It is different. And so when I woke up and I answered the phone, and it was him, and he was in town. He'd been in town all weekend, and hanging out with his friends, our friends, and he didn't call me, and he was calling me to go get brunch before he left. So I was literally having a dream that he was doing that, and I woke up. So if I didn't already have my twin, I would have been really thrown off by this. But thankfully, with this person and we talk about this kind of stuff, and I told him, I was like, I literally just dreamt that you were in town and you didn't call me. What the heck? Like, what? And so we went to brunch and we talked about it, and it was definitely a premonition dream that came true. And it's so nice to have friends that you can validate these things with, because with my twin, I have a hard time being able to validate things in person with him, which I recommend if you ever have the chance to do that with your twin. If you have a twin flame, definitely talk about it, because I definitely think that we would not have, if I had shared more of this wacky stuff with him back in the day, I wonder if we would be in, if it would have taken 30 years for this to work. So anyway, I just wanted to paint that picture of you can have very, very, very similar situations with other people, but it's not the same if it's a twin. It just isn't. And you'll know, it just isn't the same. So in the way I look at it now, because I have a lot of other people in my life that I've had these kinds of things with, that soulmate friend was probably the second most intense after my twin flame. He and I have that kind of, we still have telepathy. We'll go 10 years without, or maybe it hasn't been 10 years, but 7 years or 5 years without talking, and we can just send each other a message, and then you'll call you or something. Like, you're that connected. And I look at it now, because I've had this with so many other people, I look at it now as just people whose brains and their hearts are open to me and mine to them. So when you have that, then you can flow back and forth. So I have another good friend of mine. She's a lot younger than me, but we've lived together 3 times. So with her, we have very, very clear telepathy. It's like just even 2 or 3 days ago, I was putting a big, heavy, really heavy wooden door back on my closet, because my house is kind of small, and I had taken it off, I don't know, when I bought the house, 20 years ago. And I was trying to put this closet door back on to see if I wanted it back on this closet. And it was one of those things, I couldn't line up the things to put the pin through the whatever that thing is that holds a door on, the hinge. And I thought, oh man, if only so-and-so was here to help me just with this for 2 seconds. And then quite literally, while I was thinking that, she knocked on my door. She was here to drop off something else. So I was like, I just was thinking about you. I need your help for 30 seconds. And so she came up and helped me put the door on, and that was it. So that kind of stuff happens with her all the freaking time now. But she's a good friend of mine. We've lived together several times. So the way I look at the telepathy in that situation is you become entrained to people. So like when you watch all of us YouTubers, right? You get entrained to our energy. You get like I kind of look at it as like a river, and you're jumping in our river of energy. So when you're friends with somebody, or you live with somebody, or you're married to somebody, you can get in these grooves and you can have this telepathy. But all that other stuff is very light telepathy. You know, like, oh, I was just thinking about you, and then you texted. That's normal. That's a normal sort of telepathy. It might even be a different word for it, but that's always the word I use. And so dig around and think about, there's a lot of good podcasts and things out there about spirituality and metaphysics and the science of all this and blah, blah, blah. But there's one that I'll link to here at the end. I'm wrapping up now. I'll link to it here at the end. It's not one of mine, but it's from the Reality Revolution YouTube channel, Brian Scott. And I love his channel. He goes so nerdy and deep on all this kind of stuff, which I love. So anyway, there's one that he did about telepathy. And so I will link that to the end here, because it's like all these different people who have different situations and different styles of telepathy. Like I said, some of it's premonition dreams, some of it's just finishing each other's sentences, some of it's, hey, I was just about to text you and then you showed up. Like that all stuff is, to me, very light, and you can have that with anybody. But when you have it with your twin flame, it's more of an inner knowing. It's less about that. Like, I'm not able to get my twin to text me when I think about him. That's not what happens. But I just know what's going on in his life without talking to him, or without getting updates from friends, without having any possible way of knowing it. I just know. That's what I look at as twin flame telepathy. And then also the emotional outbursts, like I explained earlier, where you're feeling their emotions. To me, that's also twin flame telepathy. And I haven't had that with other people. So I'd love to hear if someone's actually a twin flame listening to this and you've had those emotional outbursts. Like, I'm talking more than empath. I feel people's energies. I can walk in a room and read the room. I can get into people's good moods and bad moods. This is different. This is overwhelming, all encompassing. Like, I'm curled up in a ball, just in the fetal position on the floor, crying for hours, kind of a thing. That is totally different than just being able to feel people's energies or feel off with that kind of stuff. So anyway, I'd like to hear your version of this. I would love a conversation down in the comments below. Definitely check out the telepathy episode from Reality Revolution, and I will link to it right here at the end of this video, so you can go check that out. I really think it's a fascinating topic, and I'm so grateful again that I've been on this journey for so freaking long, because I have a different perspective, because I've had all these other friends, because I've had all these other people. So I'm actually really, even though it was taken me a lot longer to figure all this out, I'm really actually glad that I was activated back before the internet, before I was swayed by all the fake blogs and fake YouTubers out there, because it's 90% of the people talking about this stuff they're not actually twin flames. So anyway, I want to hear your version and your story and your wacky stuff like that down below. And did you notice it when it started? Like, I remember that head scratching moment really distinctly, and I just was like, wow. And actually, you know what? I'll finish it by saying that I saw my twin in person almost 3 years ago. We were together for a weekend because of some friends and stuff, because we're friends now. In general, we're friends. We've repaired our friendship. So anyway, we're all hanging out, and it was like the whole day, it was just like I was trying to find the word for something, and then he would say something. It was like that tag team ticky-tacky kind of a thing, like that you get with really good friends. But what's interesting about the twin flame is, like, I haven't seen him in years. You could not talk to him for 10 years and that happens. Versus my friend that I've lived with that came over that helped me hang the door the other day. That's different when you're like hanging out with them all the time. Of course, you're going to have you're going to sync up and have those light telepathic moments and finishing each other's sentences. So to me, finishing each other's sentences is like the least of it. That's the minimum of it. That you can have with anybody. So it's this deeper, bigger stuff that is the telepathy, specifically what I call the twin flame knowing. That's what I call the telepathy. I think it's different than telepathy. I just call it the knowing, the twin flame knowing. So anyway, leave me your story down below. I definitely want to hear it. If you're your first time here, hit subscribe and that bell icon so you know when I have new videos. I'm going to spend all of 2022 sharing my 30 years of this garbage. This horrible, horrible journey, and the bliss. I'll share some of the joys too, some of the magic. Like the telepathy stuff is pretty cool, especially now that I have it with other people and I can talk about it with those other people. Is pretty cool. So anyway, thanks for watching, and check out this other video about telepathy, and I will see you around. Okay, bye.